Welcome to the Lentil Intervention Podcast, talking all things movement, whole food nutrition and environmental wellness with your hosts, Ben and Emma.
Hello everybody, welcome to episode 26. My name is Ben Alderberg, coming to you from Auckland and from Boona, Emma Strutt. Hello Emma.
G'day Ben, how you going?
Very good, thanks. We've got a very full show today, some very fascinating topics to cover, and I'll just let you get straight into it. So who's our next guest?
All right, so today we've got Dr. Taisia Cech joining us for a chat. Taisia is a GP in Nelson, New Zealand, with a special interest in lifestyle medicine and women's health. She's also the founder of Plantify, which is a platform designed to help people discover the benefits of whole food plant-based nutrition. She joins us today to discuss a wide range of topics, including plant-based pregnancies and her experience raising plant-powered little ones. She will also let us know about some really cool environmental initiatives that she's been involved with recently, so it should be a good discussion. Taisia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me on. I was just saying to you guys before, I'm such a fan, so it's a real pleasure to be on and being part of this community. It's great. Thank you.
Woo! Nice to be able to look after our fans. Doesn't mean we're going to bring them all onto the show, but thank you for being such a good support of our potty. Now, getting straight into it, there's a number of reasons why we've been wanting to get you onto the show. It's actually taken us a little while because you've just completed an exam a few days ago.
Have. Yes, so glad it's over.
So that was for the lifestyle medicine?
Yeah, so it's a lifestyle medicine board exam through the Australasian Society of Lifestyle Medicine, which I think Emma might have gone through that same journey as well. So just finished the exam last week and got the results last week that I passed. So
brilliant. Congratulations.
Awesome. So let's kick off. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Taisia. You're in Nelson. Born and bred is the first question, I guess, and tell us a little bit about your lifestyle and, life in the South Island.
Yeah, so thank you. So I'm a GP in Nelson, and I have a special interest, like you said, in lifestyle medicine and nutrition. And I guess sort of what I've been discovering more is that what my sort of quest is, or what I'd like to be involved in, is the shift towards healthcare, because I feel like as a GP we're kind of sick care providers, and I would really like to see a movement towards preventative and lifestyle features becoming more mainstream. That I work part-time doing that, but my main job at the moment really is I'm a mum of two small plant-powered boys, so one of them is 21 next week and the other one is just about 3, so that's probably more my full-time job currently.
So not a busy schedule at all. Plenty of sleep going on, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. I had to laugh, I think, one of your first podcasts when you were talking about getting about 9 hours of sleep, and I had about a 4-month-old at the time, and I was just wondering how that was possible, but it's getting better.
We need to make it a bit more relatable, I think, to our wider audience. Now, tell us more about your journey towards finding a whole food plant-based lifestyle, and of course your interest in lifestyle medicine.
Yeah, so I probably started really young. Like I grew up in Lake Rotoiti, about an hour out of Nelson, sort of farm rural life, playing on the hay bales and that, and then went to boarding school and had a few of my own sort of health issues, had glandular fever and chronic fatigue, and then got irritable bowel syndrome, and which was quite debilitating for me. That was in my teenage years. And went through kind of a string of mainstream investigations and then sort of looking into alternative treatments for that. And became really interested in the human body and how to heal. And yeah, it was quite a journey for me looking back now. And I kind of came to my own sort of discoveries as I was looking at what was setting, my conditions off. And it seemed to me that it was really creamy foods and meat foods seemed to be a real sort of trigger for me, so I started avoiding them. So I guess you could say I was becoming semi-vegetarian even sort of at the age of 17, 18, because I found the kind of foods just didn't agree with my body and how I felt. And then that, I reckon, probably triggered my interest in health and decided to go down and study medicine down at Otago. So I went and did first year health science and probably met my husband down there, probably partied a little bit too much in my first year, enjoying the student lifestyle, and then came to the conclusion that I wasn't an A+ student at the time, and I had to make the decision about whether I really was serious about doing medicine, and decided to go for it, and go and do a Bachelor of Anatomy. So that proceeded to the whole thing took about 8 years of Bachelor of Anatomy and medical school, and then. Just was always interested in how the body ticked over, and then sort of nutrition and healthy living. And probably I think it was in my first year as being a doctor, I started watching a whole lot of documentaries came out. I think a lot of your guests have already talked about, forks over knives and getting into, I think there was a juicing one, Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead, and then quite a horrifying one called Earthlings about animal cruelty. And that really stuck with me, and it started I think my first realization was, why are we not learning this, especially forks over knives? Why have we not been taught this information at medical school? Because the nutrition component was fairly small, and it seemed like the basics and made a lot of sense to me. And so I started doing a bit more reading into it, like reading the China study, and it all kind of rang quite true. So transitioned to vegetarian diet, and then basically plant-based sort of slowly, as most people do, from vegetarian to plant-based over about a year. I think what I really found, and I don't know if you guys have talked about this much, but it really improved my emotional well-being. I felt like there was always kind of this, I don't know, maybe as I was learning about animal cruelty, and there was always a slightly uncomfortable feeling. And when I started eating more plant-based, it just made a lot of sense and made me really happy. I felt like I was doing the right thing. And I learned actually later, I was listening to a podcast a few years ago, I think it was Bruce Arrow, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He does a lot of ACT and behavioural medicine, but he was talking about how happiness comes from our values, and how, in life, every day we get decisions that we can make a decision towards our values or away from our values. And when we're making decisions away from our values, that causes a lot of, discontent and unhappiness in ourselves. And when we're making decisions towards our values, and that makes us feel more vibrant and healthy and happy. And that made me understand the concept, I think, better. But I really feel like that was a change for me, made me feel good and positive. So I started spreading the word, and my husband he's never been fully plant-based, but he's definitely gone through all the information and watch the documentaries with me. So he's been really supportive along the way. And then I started, sorry, I feel like I'm rambling.
No, keep going.
Okay. Then I started a food blog, probably I think in the first year that I went plant-based, and I was really into sort of superfoods and like maca powder and goji berries and all those things, and wanting to incorporate them into cooking. And that was really fun. It was really creative, and I feel like science is a little bit sort of facts and stuff. So I did a lot of creativity stuff, like I did a lot of art when I was at high school. And I found this kind of creative outlet. But I soon came to realize that all these sort of super amazing foods, they weren't really the answer to health. Having a handful of goji berries is not going to make you super healthy. And it was, just going back to the basics of eating, potatoes and spinach and all those good things, and lentils and those healthy things. And so I kind of came away from that blog sort of more looking at plant-based recipes that I could show people that it was easy to be plant-based rather than buying all these expensive ingredients. And from there I probably went, I came to Nelson my second year working as a doctor, and I was plant-based then, and I heard about the eCornell plant-based certificate. So I thought that sounded really good to learn a little bit more, because I felt like I hadn't learned much of this kind of stuff in med school. And so I did that, and that was really eye-opening. And then it kind of left me, though, feeling like there wasn't much information out there, and maybe I didn't look hard enough. But I felt like for my friends and for my patients, there wasn't a very good resource about where you can get lots of calcium from a plant-based diet, or where you can get lots of iron from. And that inspired me to make a website, which is now up and running, called Plantify. And I wanted to just provide more information to people that were interested. And I don't know why I decided to, but I went through all the, there's this great food database in New Zealand where it shows lists tables of foods and all their content, so you can see like calcium and iron and all that, breaks it all down. And I trawled through them for hours looking at the foods that were highest in iron and calcium, and tried to put some tables together per sort of serving what would be like the highest calcium and the highest iron food. Looking back now, I think there's lots of resources like that, more and more, but it was a really good learning journey to kind of consolidate my learning from my course. But it did take a wee while to get the actual website up and running. But it's been a work in progress, but really, I really enjoy it in the food creation side of things, to link that, I guess, the kind of facts and information to the actual food to make it practical for people.
Brilliant. It sounds like you've got a really nice balance going on now with the creative side of things and then the science to back everything up. Perfect.
I like that. Yeah, I do like that.
And tell you what, when we ask people about their journey, there's been no better response than this. I mean, what a journey. Now, talk about all the things you've been involved in. There's another aspect that you're very passionate about at the moment, a fantastic initiative. It's called Good Food Cities. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? What is it? What does it mean? What's the concept? What's the goal with it?
Yeah, I'll bring it back a little bit how I came about it. So I've been really fortunate to meet a pharmacist here, a community pharmacist named Hannah O'Malley, and she has a
legend.
Yeah, she is amazing, and she works, as you probably know, for Doctors for Nutrition. She is such a passionate woman and very inspiring, and she's got a website called The Better Base, and she, through, I think it was my husband's work partner, flattered with her anyway. It was one of those things where one thing led to another, and ended up making contact with her, and it was really cool to find someone that was into the same kind of thing, into the same ideas as me, and because it does feel quite lonely sometimes when you're, I don't know, I like to think of it that, an early adapter of all these healthy kind of changes coming about, but you do feel sometimes when everyone around you doesn't really understand or is not fully on board, that it's nice to connect with people, which is why I've really enjoyed this podcast, that people that are looking into the same way towards health. And anyway, she was so inspiring, and she invited me to be part of the Big Fat Lie premiere. I think he had the name's gone from me. The man who
Grant Dixon. Yeah,
Grant Dixon, that's right. Yeah, so she invited me to be one of the panelists in that, and I was quite nervous, but turned up for the night. And we had such a good response. We ended up having 2 screenings in Nelson. I think we had over 300 people in total turn up to that. And through that, those two evenings, I met Rob Begaho, who is a dentist in Nelson, and he's been an awesome supporter for Meat-Free Mondays at our hospital cafe, and through banning sugar-free drinks at the hospital. So he was really inspiring. And then John Potter, who is a professor and has been an advisor to the, I think, health advisor to the Ministry of Health, and so he is a big player in food nutrition. Dr. Wayne Hurlow, who's another GP here in Nelson. Dr. Graham Evans, who I think was in people a while ago, who's an anaesthetist here, and also Luke Wilson, who did a chat. I think he was on your first podcast. So he went to medical school with me, and I hadn't really connected with him since then, but he came along for the screen together. And through that, we kind of decided afterwards that it would be neat to keep going with this kind of connection that we had, and we formed what we call it the Good Food Group currently, which is an awesome, now a little bit bigger group of people that are really passionate about the same things. And there's been quite a lot of initiatives, and the Good Food Cities has been one of that. Another great thing that's come out of that is the CHIP program. So there's Graham, the anaesthetist, and his wife, and Wayne, the GP, have been running 2 CHIP courses in Nelson for the last year, and that has been so great. I've had quite a few patients go through that and have really lost a lot of weight and had improved in cholesterol and sugar levels. So it's been really neat to have that in our in our back door. And then the Good Food Cities was something I think definitely one of the things that Hannah campaigned, that I was talking about, Hannah the pharmacist. So that was that's an initiative that has come about. It's an international kind of thing where I guess it's looking at our food system. So it's looking at the way where we get our food from, what we're eating, and then also how we're managing our food waste. And it's got some big cities involved. So the C40, it's called the C40 Good Food Cities Declaration. Cities involved like London, Paris, Milan, Tokyo, and basically these cities, the mayors of the cities, have kind of made an agreement to work towards to achieve a planetary health diet, and looking at their processes. There's no exact script on how to do it, but it's kind of a commitment that you're working on, and there's different sort of suggestions they have working on improving these 3 areas in the city. So we thought it'd be really cool if Nelson could be New Zealand's first one of these. And so we've been campaigning to our city council and making some submissions toward that. And as part of that, I guess it was also educating people about what planetary diet was. So that's what the Good Food Cities is suggesting, that people, I think the aim is and by 2030 have everybody able to be accessing a planetary health diet. So a planetary health diet came from the Eat Lancet Commission. And you guys may have probably read into that a little bit. So that was for the people that are listening who haven't heard about that. It's a really cool thing to look up. So it was 30 scientists around the globe looking at, what's the best way that we can feed the world's population of 10 billion. So obviously our population is growing, and we're going to have to find better sustainable ways of feeding everybody, trying to improve our health and deaths word-wise, because we know that diet is the biggest, or probably the biggest factor in chronic health conditions around the world. And also to be environmentally sustainable, so be able to keep the environment going in a sustainable manner. And their recommendations, basically, when they looked at all the areas, so what would be best for the planet and what would be best for people's health, they're saying that a whole food, plant-based sort of way of eating is going to be the best for both those areas. There are lots of fruit, vegetables, nuts, seeds, whole grains, and really limiting animal products. So I think they still have animal products in there if you choose to. They do say plant proteins are a good way to go, but I think it's very limited. Like maybe the recommendations are about one hamburger a week, so it's a very small amount if you choose to. And I think that's I think there's lots of stigma about vegan diets and the kind of name of these kind of things. And I love the idea of a planetary diet, because people get that, and I think there's a big shift in a lot of people realizing what's going on around at the moment with the planet and wanting to make change. And this kind of fits in well with that. So it'd be cool to get the word out there about the planetary diet more, I reckon.
That's right. We've been making a very, very big connection between planetary health and personal health, because it's not too, they're not two isolated components. It's one impacts the other for sure. Just going back to the C40 cities, what you're talking about is actually part of a bigger picture. It includes other components such as energy in buildings, transportation and urban planning, water quality, air quality, which when you go through the website, it's seems to be the harder one that no one seems to have signed up to yet, and also the way they adapt, implement, and so on. And I was surprised to see Auckland's on there as well on that list. This is more the C40 as opposed to the good food specific. So I think more and more, hopefully, people are going to get on board. So when they're looking at transportation and energy source and all that, it's certainly a big picture. And going back to the Lancet report, we talk about reducing animal-based products, but it's also important to remind our listeners that when we talk about a whole food plant-based diet versus consuming less of the unhealthy foods, that also includes the refined, super processed, so your sugars, refined grains, etc., etc. So it's the impact on the planet, on the production of these foods, and also the impact on your health of what you're consuming. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach with the outcome of that report. So gosh, there's a lot to take in there.
Yeah. One of the great things that is a personal change that I've made from this is that during some of these talks, we got together with a guy called Ben Bushell, and he runs a composting service here in Nelson, which has started in the last couple of years. And that's, curbside pickup compost. So we've been doing that over the last maybe 6 months or so, and that's such a great service where someone comes, you've got a bin, someone comes and picks up your compost for those people that can't have a home compost. And they're going to, and as part of this initiative, one of the council's goals is to do a trial of that run through the council as in a sort of a curbside pickup for everybody to be able to access, which would be really neat. And we've gone down and had a look at with the way they're processing the compost, and then it all feeds back to make this beautiful stuff to go back in your garden. I think getting cities involved in that, because I feel like we don't have enough responsibility about the waste that we're producing, and that's really highlighted that for me, which is new ideas for me.
So Nelson has actually taken this on board, or are you kind of still pushing for that to be?
I think it's still under process. I don't know the ins and outs of it very much. I'm still kind of waiting to hear about it, but I think there is a little bit between the council versus the DHB and what responsibility the council has versus what the DHB in terms of the health side of things. I do know there's initiatives like planting edible gardens, around the city more that the council are involved in, which is really neat. But I think some of the people at the DHB have been talking with the council about who's going to do what and that side of things. There's always a little bit of politics involved.
Yeah, for sure.
I can't remember who was it. Hannah Blumhardt we spoke to about recycling and reducing or eradicating plastic waste, but about Nelson being such a progressive little city. But I guess
she said it was the best place to live zero waste, which I was surprised about.
Yeah, that's right. I think the compactness of the city just makes it a little bit easier to trial a lot of concepts as a council. I mean, gosh, come to Auckland and try a suburb. I mean, you're not going to get anywhere. But yeah, Nelson's it's a very, I don't know, I don't want to call it a progressive society, but just a more open-minded and I guess more in tune with what people have around them and how precious it is. I mean, you've got the mountain right behind you, you've got the ocean right in front of you, and it's I guess people are a bit more aware of we actually need to do something. And also a very active community, I suppose. So again, people are a bit more conscious about what they're eating and their health.
I hope so, yeah. And I think also the way we get our food, like we've got the markets and we've got quite a few sort of specialised bulk bin stores, which makes it a little bit easier than going to the supermarket with all the waste and the packaging, which is really cool.
And this is a really important initiative to make sure that we have a healthy, happy planet to live on. Now, I'm trying to do a nice segue here. What if we want to bring new humans into this healthy, happy planet?
Well played, Emma. Well played. There we go.
Let's talk a little bit about plant-based pregnancy, because I know a lot of people, they may be vegan or vegetarian, and if they do happen to fall pregnant, then they get a little bit anxious. Can I stick to this diet? Is it safe? So as a GP, what would you have to say about that?
Yeah, I think I had the same concerns in my first pregnancy. So I didn't know anyone else that had been plant-based through pregnancy, and I requested my midwife to refer me to the dietitian for a chat because I just wanted to make sure I was doing it right. And I think also back then I was worried I had a lot of confirmation bias. When you believe in something but you're not sure, you can search. If you don't believe in vaccines, you can look at the internet and find lots of information about why vaccines are bad, and I was worried that I was down this path that was just because the more I looked, the more I found. And I think that's been really great about this lifestyle medicine exam that I've just sat, is getting a whole body to look at the evidence and to come to the same conclusion has been very reassuring and very given me a lot of confidence in the area. But I didn't have that back then. So I went to the dietitian for a chat when I was first pregnant and went with the food diary, and she was really happy that I was meeting all my food needs. I think the one suggestion she had was maybe try and get one more serving of calcium into my diet, but otherwise she felt like things were really good. So that gave me some confidence, I think, just because I didn't really know much, anyone else doing it, which was really, but now looking back, I've had quite a few patients ask me about it and have gone through plant-based pregnancy since then. And I feel like I know a lot more now and can confidently say that it's very healthy and it's easy to achieve all your needs on a plant-based diet. I think one of the things I was looking at the other day was from the American Dietetic Association, and they were saying appropriate planned vegetarian diets as well as vegan diets are healthy nutrition and can provide all the benefits you need and for all stages of life. So during pregnancy, lactation, infancy, childhood, we now know that it's safe and we can get what we need.
So there's obviously what you're consuming as a pregnant woman. Mm-hmm. What about feeding newborns? What about on a plant-based diet?
Yeah, I mean, there's a big area about breastfeeding and people that can't breastfeed and bottle feeding and all that. That's maybe an issue I won't go into. But when they get a little older and they start doing their baby weed leaning or feeding them solids, there's lots of good resources out there now. So I guess thinking about things like making sure there's enough like calcium in their diet and protein. But if you're looking at a whole food diet that's varied and you're sort of proactively healthy foods, we're not eating out of packets. I think there's that's not something that I've come across as being a problem. There's some great resources out there. Plant-based juniors is one that I think Dr. Luke Wilson got me onto, which is really cool too. Dietitians, mums that put out sort of cookbooks and baby-led weaning information, and also talk about supplements for kids, which I found really helpful going along. So I guess when you're feeding your little ones, you feel more worried, because when it's yourself, you feel, you can kind of, make your own choices and suffer the consequences. But when you have a kid, you want them to, be the healthiest they can be. And I do believe they are the healthiest they can be when you're eating, whole food, plant-based. But I think there are some things to consider. And as we've talked about it with adults, B12 is really important. If they're not getting B12 from an animal source, then making sure that they're getting some form of B12 supplement. And then not from a plant-based perspective, but something just generally, like iodine in our soil is not very high, so we need to be thinking, you don't want to give lots of salt to young kids because their kidneys can't process it, so thinking about some kind of iodine adding in, and perhaps vitamin D, because we know, especially in New Zealand, with our being down the equator during the winter months, especially if we're inside a little bit, we're not getting that vitamin D production, so we need to think about, even if you're not on a plant-based diet, considering vitamin D, adding that to your diet as well. So they're probably the main things, I guess, for people to. And the plant-based juniors have a great resource about, if you want to look at how much that your little ones, depending on the age, should be getting, and good sources to find of that supplement. So they're probably the main things that I would recommend to people if they're considering bringing up their kids plant-based.
So when you're bottle feeding, what are you actually feeding?
Well, not under ones, but when my kids turned one, they went on to soy milk. We do a bit of soy and a bit of oat milk, and soy milk has got good protein content, and as long as you've got a varied diet, otherwise I didn't feel uncomfortable about that at all. And then, making sure, like they're saying, sort of calcium is in their diet. So things like tofu that's been set in calcium, which is most of the tofu that you can get, getting some greens into them, getting lots of nuts and seeds, making bliss balls, all that, I think, is absolutely fine. So I don't worry about not giving them cow's milk. Yeah. I have to say they do have a little bit of cheese from their dad sometimes, but that's okay with me.
Yeah, I think it's a really important note to just let listeners be aware of that. You absolutely, it's safe. You can do this with your children. The only thing that I would say to be a little bit mindful of is don't put them on a typical whole food plant-based diet that an adult is following. They've got really tiny tummies, so they can't deal with, massive amounts of fibre. So as you said, make use of the dried fruit and the nuts and seeds and the more calorie-dense soy products, etc., just to make sure that they're getting adequate calories and protein without filling up their tummies with all of that fibre.
Yeah. And if you had a look at my children, they're definitely not skinny, so I think they're doing all right.
Gosh, and you don't want to increase the amount of nappy changes in a day either, so yeah, definitely ease up on the fibre component, I think.
Yeah, and 2 under 3, I tell you what. It's busy.
Yep, I can just imagine. So, moving on to, I don't know why I'm leading into this next conversation, but let's talk about women's health in general. And you know what? Actually, let's hit pause here for a second. And I think this is an important message. And when we talk about the conversation or the topic women's health, it's for men especially. I think it's very easy to say, it's women's health, it's women's issues, not my problem. No, it's for them to deal with. But I think it is important for men to some degree to be educated and understanding, because whether it's your partner, your wife, your girlfriend, your daughter, anyone that's close to you that you care about, having at least some kind of understanding of certain, I guess, ailments that are particular to women is important, because how you can be, I guess, not sympathetic, but understanding of some of the complications that they're undergoing or experiencing, sometimes associated with a bit of discomfort and pain and so on. And also sometimes just that ability to know what to do and, like I said, be understanding. So I think it's not a topic that we should switch off to. I think, it is important to at least be aware. So hopefully I've explained that well, and I'll let you guys carry on with that.
It brings up memories of I had a friend in university, and his girlfriend at the time was pregnant, and he said he used to just hide behind the couch and throw chocolates at her because he didn't know how to deal with the mood.
It's a good technique.
Yeah.
Hey, noted then. That's point number 1. Throw chocolates.
And hide. All right, yeah, so let's do a little bit of a deep dive here, because I know you have extra qualifications in women's health. Are there any important tips that you'd like to let plant-based eaters know about?
Yeah, interesting you say, because I was just looking this morning actually through, because I did a women's health certificate in my first year as being a doctor, and I just looked through the notes today just out of interest to see if there was any mention of lifestyle or diet, and there was not. So it was surprisingly just about, medical management of certain conditions, which is such a shame. So probably my women's health knowledge is just as a special interest of, reading up in those areas. But yeah, I was quite interested to see if there was anything, because I couldn't remember. But I may have heard a mention about menopause and soy products, I think. But other than that, I think there wasn't really much talked about. So yeah, women's health, that's a big topic. I guess starting from, fertility, the basics is, exercising, avoiding substances that are going to be, alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, making sure that you're doing good stress management, and then getting a healthy diet. And I never took a multivitamin pre-fertility and during pregnancy, and I guess that's an individual person's choice. I do recommend to my patients to take folic acid pre-pregnancy if they're trying to conceive, because even though a plant-based diet, you're probably better off than most because you're getting lots of folate from the green leafy veggies and that, but it is good just to make sure your levels are adequate, because we know that when the baby is first forming, so in that first 6 weeks when you might not even know you're pregnant, that's when the spinal cord is forming, and taking a folic acid supplement has been shown to reduce the chance of spinal malformation. So that's probably the one supplement I would recommend people if they're considering conception to think about. But other than that, just being generally living a healthy lifestyle, I think is really important to give your baby the best chance, because they have that whole 1,000 years thing where they're saying that, that is the most important time, and it doesn't actually start from birth, it starts from conception, and probably even preconception, about being the healthiest you can be to start your baby off well. And now we know a lot more about things like epigenetics, where your genes aren't your destiny, and we know that things during pregnancy and that can affect the genes of the baby, the genes that are expressed later in life. So it is really important to try and have a good weight management and live healthily while you're pregnant.
Yeah, and I'd just like to point out, hopefully everyone listening will be all over this, but vitamin B12 as well. That's a really important supplement to take if you're whole food plant-based. And the fetus actually obtains B12 via the placenta, which means that it's drawing on newly absorbed B12. So mothers, please do not rely on your stores. You need to be actively taking that supplement throughout pregnancy.
And then I think the general recommendations are iodine as well once you become pregnant, mainly and while you're breastfeeding, just because our soils are not very adequate in iodine for everybody, just to think about.
Okay, so we've talked about pregnancy a fair bit now. What about, once we move later on in years to menopause, anything that we should know there? Obviously, bone health is a big one.
Yeah, bone health, that's an interesting topic. Because, and actually just the other day I was watching TV and there was an ad about milk and strong bones. But I think when you look at the research, and Emma, you might want to put 5 cents in here, but from what I've seen, there's been no really association between milk consumption and fracture risk, or even maybe detrimental. So that the countries that have the highest fracture risk, the countries that have the highest milk consumption have the highest fracture risk. So I don't think that the whole campaigning about drinking milk is good for your bones is really has too much evidence behind it. We do know that it is important to have calcium, adequate amounts of calcium. They don't think taking a calcium supplement now is such a great idea. So there's been studies to show that you might have an increased risk of heart disease or stroke if you take a calcium supplement. So those recommendations about taking calcium supplements have kind of reversed now recently, to say that's maybe not a good idea, but it probably being, because that's a big hit of calcium at a time, probably being more mindful that there's just general amounts of calcium in your diet that's good for bones, and vitamin D is important for bone health too. So considering bioavailability of calcium is another thought. So there are some types of green leafy vegetables that have components called oxalates that make it harder to bind calcium. But some of them, like kale, I think is a good example, broccoli, those kind of things have really good bioavailability, I think even better than dairy products. So you can go to my website if you like on Plantify and have a little read up on that. But it gives you some ideas about getting good calcium. And then we know for bone health that some kind of resistance training or impact on the bones is really important. So if you're not already doing it, definitely as you get older, you should be really thinking about doing that to build up good bone health for reducing hip fracture risks or any fracture risks. That comes basically from when you're going to menopause and your ovaries stop producing so much estrogen, and that's when we start worrying about bone health.
When you talk about the risks of taking calcium supplementation, that kind of backs up the point of, the value of, well, is there value in taking a multivitamin? Is there not better value in seeing a dietitian or seeing a health professional saying, okay, where am I actually deficient? Which supplements should I take? And take those rather than just a broad spectrum, let's just tick all the boxes, wherein they're normally low doses where you might need a high dose of, say, B12 in particular, or you might need to boost something else, let's say maybe vitamin D, but you don't necessarily need all the other long list of minerals and vitamins.
That's such an important point. I get asked that a lot, actually, from patients, should I be on a multivitamin or a general multi? And I think there's a few things to consider about that. But if you think about what your body's doing all the time is trying to regulate that you don't get too much or too little of everything, then I think you probably has to work quite hard when you put in a supplement all the time of extra vitamins to try and get rid of the ones that you don't actually need. And then you're peeing them out anyway, making expensive urine. And then I did see a few years ago, and I haven't had a look since then, but that there were some studies showing that people that took multivitamins had increased morbidity and mortality. So I don't think there's much evidence for taking a general multivitamin.
I don't think there's any evidence for it.
No, and you're much better.
Not multivitamins. Sorry, I mean specific nutrients. Yes, in certain instances. But
multis, yeah, and also we don't even really know how the foods work together. Such a synergistic effect when you eat whole foods, how they all interact together. And I think science hasn't even really touched on that yet. So you're much better to spend your money on good fruit and veggies and whole grains, nuts and seeds, than buying these multivitamins that are advertised all the time.
They're quick fix pills, aren't they? I mean, it's you market it as here, take this pill. Don't worry about all this other stuff. Just one pill, it'll sort you out. And so it's such an easy concept to market, such an easy concept to make money off, and that's all it is, really, isn't it?
I think it's also important to point out a lot of people think that vitamins, minerals, they're natural, they're safe. These things are highly unregulated. Like mainstream medicine is tightly regulated. They need randomized controlled trials to be passed multiple times until they're deemed safe to have. It's not the same standards for the vitamin and mineral industry, and oftentimes these products are also contaminated with heavy metals. Like sometimes they're synthetic kind of vitamins, so they've been made from, tar and all kinds of crazy things. So yeah, it's not automatically safe if it's a vitamin or mineral. You can be doing harm, and as you said, your body's never doing just one thing. So the synergistic effect of food is always preferable than just taking the tablet.
Yeah, definitely.
Taisia, do you want to touch on you mentioned it, but it's and we've spoken about it in past episodes. We even had a special episode on it. But do you just want to touch on soy products, especially for women's health? Because, we really want to drill in all the myth busting around this.
I think it's important to distinguish whole soy products or minimally processed soy products with, soy isolates or heavily processed soy. But whole soy products or, minimally processed, I think, your adami beans that you can get from the supermarket. My kids love them. They love opening them up and finding the beans inside. Your tofus, tempeh, all really good to include into your diet. And I'm always surprised at the lack of knowledge for people. They relate soy to sort of estrogen enhancing. And I was at the supermarket once with my husband, and he was putting a carton of soy milk into our trolley, and someone walked past and said, "Oh, that's going to give you man boobs, eh?" I was just shocked at the lack of knowledge around that, because we know that's not the case, and actually the way soy works is that it's different from estrogen. It can even partially block, and Emma might want to chip in here, but it partially blocks some of the estrogen receptors. So we know that women that have had breast cancer, if they're eating soy products, they have a decreased risk reoccurrence of breast cancer, and we know that soy products are good for prostate cancer risk. I think we're very misinformed about soy and the estrogenic effects.
Yeah, lots of bro science around, and all these. It's usually gentlemen. Sorry, Ben, but it usually is the gents
That's true.
perpetuating
100%.
this myth about soy giving people man boobs. But let's not talk about the hops in their beer.
Exactly, and look, but I mean also, and Taisia, you mentioned using soy products for toddlers or little kids. Again, it is safe. It is fine.
Exactly. No, I am very confident and don't have a problem with soy and soy milk. And yeah, my kids love soy, and I think it's a good, it's got good protein in it, it's got good calcium in it, it's got good fiber in it, and yeah, it's got lots of goodies in it that are health promoting. So that's not something I'm worried about.
Yeah, and I think the difference between a soy milk powder, which is basically the beans ground and there's all your nutrients, versus a soy protein powder, which is usually a soy isolate, and as I always explain, isolate is the word isolated. It's on its own. You've extracted the protein, left all the fiber, the goodness, the micronutrients and all that behind. So big difference between the two. And of course with soy milk products, in fact, I think Taisia, you asked me the other day which one I use. GMO free is usually the one we try and consume, and then the other note, when we eat tofu, well, it doesn't mean go out and eat deep fried tofu. You still want to prepare it in a sort of with a healthier approach. So it's still how we eat the food that's as important as what we eat.
Yeah.
Just touching on heart health, because after menopause, obviously with the hormonal changes, we know that women are slightly at an increased risk after they go through those changes. And I was just thinking about soy being heart healthy as well. But obviously the general principles of a whole food plant-based diet will go a long way for protecting your heart. But any top tips there?
It makes me think of some of the studies I've been learning about in my lifestyle medicine exam, just in general about heart disease, not specifically to women, but I think I feel like there's been so much evidence now how healthy a whole food plant-based diet is for heart health, and I'm frustrated that it's not more mainstream than it already is. And some of the studies that just came to mind when you were asking me was some of the studies that T. Colin Campbell did in rural China. So looking at people living in those rural communities that were having reduced fat intake. They were basically on mostly a plant-based diet and a small amount of meat. I think they had 3 times the fiber intake and 1/10 the amount of meat intake. And US men compared to they had 16 times the greater risk of cardiovascular disease, and women had 5 times the risk. So it's sometimes interesting to look at these populations. Another one that comes to mind that I was reading about was one when they were doing autopsies of Ugandan, I think it was men versus American in missionary hospitals, and they found out of the 632 people, only one one person had cardiovascular disease or had died of an MI, whereas 136 US men had died of an MI, so that was like 22% versus 0.2%, just because of the difference in lifestyle and diet. Another one that makes me, which is always still blows my mind, and one of the reasons why I guess Sports Overnight, the documentary got me so interested, was some of the studies that they've done looking at how plaque, the fat that builds up in the heart arteries can be reversed, and that was quite mind-blowing because I think in the past we've always thought that was an irreversible process that would just get worse with time. The Ornish's study, I think he had low fat as well as stress management, smoking, some group support, but he showed a reduction in plaques. So I think there was about an 8% reduction in plaques versus the controls who were just on a normal, I call it a SAD diet, a standard American diet, to about 27% increase in plaque diameter at 5 years. And if you took the people that weren't taking a cholesterol tablet, which kind of makes a better control, versus the people that weren't taking a cholesterol tablet but were on a lifestyle intervention, there was a 54% difference. So they had 46% increase in plaques size versus the 8% reduction in those compared to the standard American diet. So it's just massive, and I feel like this information isn't getting out there enough that you can really make such a big difference for prevention, but also when you already have cardiovascular disease. and maybe a little bit of a segue into men's health is that whole area also is erectile dysfunction is such a common reason why patients come to see me for wanting Viagra or some kind of pill to help. But a lot of the time we need to be looking about why is this happening, and again, a lot of that is related to it's not just heart disease, but it's your whole body where the vessels are being affected by our diets and our lifestyle. So it's our brain increasing our stroke risk, it's to our kidneys, it's also to our down their regions. And so a lot of erectile dysfunction people, it's a big red flag to say that they might have some heart disease going on here because there's blockages and the blood flow is not working properly. And I'm sad to think that a lot of people just end up getting handed a pill and sent on their way without looking at the underlying cause.
But it's like that with a lot of health ailments. I mean, erectile dysfunction is like you say, it's a precursor to bigger issues. But unfortunately, and you mentioned this in your many years of study, is it's a system that's designed around prescription of medication. That's where the money is, as opposed to saying just eat your veggies and you'll be sweet and I'll never see you again. And that's and we talk a lot about heart disease, but type 2 diabetes is another big one that is so simply caused by choice of what we eat and so easily reversed by fixing our eating as well. So
and I think it's not, and there's such a complex thing going on here where I know the GPs that I work with, it's not that they want to make money for the pharmaceutical companies. It's not this that they want to do the easy option. There's so much more going on as the patient's expectations and our confidence and what we know, about and what we've been taught in lifestyle and the importance of it and the time limitations. And there's such a system failure at the moment. I think that is going on that needs a big look at, because we can't carry on the way we're going, and chronic diseases getting out of control. The money that we're spending on it is huge, and it's going to get a lot. I think one of my exam questions was, what's the outcome for people that were born after 2000 and their risk of diabetes, and it was about 33% risk of having diabetes for the people that were born after 2000, and if you're a black person in America, it was 50%. So when these problems aren't going away, they're going to get worse, and we really need to change some things drastically. Sorry, it's my little rant, but it's a big passion of mine.
And I think it's important to note that, because it really does need a systemic kind of change away from a sick care system to a healthcare system to support all of these preventative measures. But this really needs to take place, because the way we're headed, the healthcare system will bankrupt Australia. I don't know what it's like in New Zealand, but if we keep heading in this direction, it definitely will. And life expectancy, it will start to go down again. This is the first generation that might actually live a smaller amount of time than their parents, which is really sad.
No, I think in New Zealand, we're and Taisia, you might know a little bit more being in this, but I just read the other day that the current government is looking at closing some of the DHB, some of the district health boards, and that's for funding. So yeah, we do have health boards that are in debt, and there's also a shortage of staff. So growing need to provide healthcare, but there's not enough people to provide that healthcare. So I think globally it's an issue that we're certainly having to grapple with. And again, just like from an environmental point of view, instead of going to the source of the problem, we're trying to throw money and ideas at just trying to fix some of the visual
band-aid solutions.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. But it's exciting to know that these lifestyle changes financially make so much sense, and they can be the solution. So we have got answers. We just need to put it in place. Another study I've just thought of while you were talking was one where they had people that had coronary artery disease, and they were randomized into having a stent or doing exercise, and the people that did exercise did just as well, I think even better than the people that went and got a stent for stable coronary artery disease, did just as well, and the costs were about half. So we're not offering these solutions, or not, these solutions aren't available to people. One, they don't know about it, and two, they're not being sort of laid out. But we've got answers there, which is exciting. But it's just trying to get the ball rolling and make change.
Let's not forget the Broad study. That was minimal. Well, I mean, the cost of sending a couple of GPs and a few people, but honestly, I mean, the intervention was minimal. It was education based.
Yeah.
It was advising what to eat. Now do it. We'll come back and do some tests. And look at the outcome. It was that simple. There was no prescription of exercise. There was no meal plans. There was none of this whole, pay me this amount of money and I'll give you a beautiful little template, a graph or whatever. It was an education-based approach. And look at the outcomes.
And no calorie restrictions. So people felt good. They felt, they were eating till they were full, which is so much more sustainable.
And quite similar to the CHIP program.
Yes.
Well, I was going to say, I think Nelson's, in general, I think a lot of the work that the group of you, and I say the group, I mean, there's a lot of fantastic people like yourselves involved in trying to propagate change. You really got to push hard. I mean, I don't need to be saying this, but, the outcome can be so fulfilling and tick so many boxes that surely then that can't be ignored. If a place like Nelson can start achieving some positive outcomes, then why can't we start bringing into other small towns, perhaps, just to sort of gain momentum and then hit the big cities where the big populations are. And then Australia's always good, steal something of ours and call it theirs. But let's lead. Let's we've got leaders. We've got a lot of good thinkers. We've got a lot of good leaders. So let's sort of use that for actual positive change.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, so look, let's wrap it up there, Taisia, because we know you've got two hungry little hippos waiting to be fed, I'm sure. But look, it's been a while. But we're so glad we've made it happen. Having one of our biggest fans on the show, tick. But more importantly, the work that you do is super inspiring. As a health professional / mum, so you're showing that it's so possible, safe, doable and rewarding to bring up kids from I was going to say from inception, but from pregnancy into the world on a whole food plant-based lifestyle, but also the work that you do. So the whole concept with the Good Food Cities, I think that's just brilliant. You and the team, Hannah, and all the other good people. So thank you so much for sharing your story and just giving us direction, a lot of our listeners, of what's
and
possible.
All the resources on Plantify as well. Fantastic.
100%. We'll definitely be linking that in our show notes. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm very humbled when I got asked, and I thank you guys for doing this amazing podcast. It's really, I feel like it's really created a community of like-minded people that want to make change. So yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure to be on.
Thank you for listening to the Lentil Intervention podcast. If you found this interesting, make sure you subscribe and share it with your friends.